you have to do. And I think the question that I would ask is, do we have the courage to stand up for what's right? And I would say universities do a very good job of that. We believe very much in access, for example. We believe in educating students as well as we can. We believe in integrity. I mean, one of our big issues right now is all of the students who are plagiarizing. And it's kind of, I don't know, I wouldn't say it's rampant, but I hear a lot of complaints from my faculty about plagiarism. So what do you do? What do you do when you find plagiarism? What do you do when you do that? What do you think?
Give them an F.
What do you do over at Carlsbad when you find someone plagiarizing?
Give them an F.
Yeah. You know, we're not as tough as we should be on it. You've had several plagiarism cases in the grad school, haven't you? Yeah. But most of them from my college. That's because we have most of the graduate students. But what do you do about it? Do you do what has to be done? Do you kick them out of school?
No, we don't. We work with your faculty. We work with your department heads. We find out what kinds of solutions they would like to implement, and we work with them. We work with the student. And sometimes it's a student doesn't know what plagiarism is, and sometimes they're just cheating.
If they're a graduate student in the College of Business and 25 years old, don't you think it's about time they learned? I think sometimes we tend to coddle students. We say, oh, well, did you mentor them correctly or something? These are adults. We're not talking about 12-year-olds. We're talking about adults. Some of these adults are 40 and 50 years old that plagiarize. What has to be done to do that? Do we do the right thing? It's not always easy to do the right thing, but nobody said it would be. That's the way the Cowboys feel about it. Okay. Yes, go ahead.
I like the sentiment, and I feel that our life would be a whole lot easier if things really were so black and white. So to take the example of plagiarism, I am sure there are instances where we cannot determine if it's actually plagiarism or not. Or sometimes we start down a path, and because we're intellectuals, we seek input, and we learn that path is actually ill-advised, and we don't finish that particular path. So I think...
But keep in mind, he went back to the Cowboys. And to the Cowboy, it's pretty simple. Now, I'm not saying that what we do is as simple as in cowboy life. Doing the right thing, was it the right thing to kill somebody when you're a cowboy?
At times.
You know, it was the right thing. In the old days, it was the right thing to kill a cowboy if they took your horse. You know why? Because you endangered your life. If you're out there between here and Deming and somebody takes your horse and it's 105 degrees, you've endangered somebody's life. It's the right thing to a cowboy to gun someone down if they draw on you first, right? That for years and years. If you draw on me and I beat you to the draw, it was a done deal.
Case dismissed.
Case dismissed, yeah. So when you look at the Cowboy Code of Ethics, they lived in a lot simpler time than we do, and they dealt with a lot simpler issues. Okay, where are we? Be tough but fair.
So we want to know what their policy manual is.
It was made by Colt, firearms manufacturer. Be tough but fair. Cowboys always felt that they were always into fair play. In the prairie life, everything was kind of fair. They demanded, and Teddy Roosevelt actually popularized the square deal. Everything had to be a square deal. They wanted to be fair about it. And for example, in his book, in Hospitality, I did not know this until I read the book, that in fact, in the Old West, when you're riding across the range and you came to a farmhouse and you were hungry, you could water your horse there, and nobody was home. You could water your horse there. You could borrow some grain for your horse. You could go into the farmstead and fix yourself a meal. And you didn't have to pay for it. And then you would get on your horse and ride on. The trick is you had to offer the same thing when somebody rode through your ranch at the same time. So you had to be fair about it. You couldn't In fact, one of the worst things you could do apparently in the Old West is if you offered to feed somebody and then tried to charge them for it, That was not a good thing. That was not an ethical thing to do. But the fairness came from being able to take care of each other, to be fair, make everybody a square deal, okay? When you make a promise, keep it. You know, I think we probably do a pretty good job at the university. When you make a promise, keep it. We promise to give these students a fine education, don't we? We promise that. And in the main, I think we do a very good job. I'm a little disconcerted with all of these popularity polls I see from time to time, because we've seen such great success on our graduates that we've kept our promise. We've graduated some of the finest people in the world, very successful doing what they're doing. And our students have a reputation for a fine work ethic. And so we're doing, I think, in many ways, we're doing what we promised to do. I always love the story, and probably only Ricardo, maybe Bernadette, some of the people who've been around New Mexico for a long time would remember my favorite governor was Bruce King. And the most famous story about Bruce King, well, there's several famous stories about Bruce King, but the most famous I remember is the legislature, one and only time, passed a right-to-work bill. And you have to kind of be into unions and anti-unions to understand right to work. But at one time, they actually passed it. And Governor King vetoed it. And a supporter ran up to him and said, "Governor King, how could you veto that? You promised me that you wouldn't veto it." He says, "Yes, I know, but I didn't make a commitment." And so there may be a fine line between a promise and a commitment. But we pretty much at New Mexico State University keep our promises. The one that was featured in the book, have you seen Lonesome Dove, which takes you all afternoon to watch? It comes in a series, and one time I decided to watch it all, and at one time it was a long time. But in that story, they were attacked by Indians, and a guy named Gus was injured, and his buddy Carl was there. And so anyway, he ended up, the leg became infected and gangrenous and so on and so forth. And as Gus was about to die, they were in Montana. They'd finally gotten to Montana. By the way, they filmed a lot of Lonesome Dove in New Mexico during my tenure as governor. As a matter of fact, Michael Martin Murphy had a lot to do with them coming to New Mexico to film that. So anyway, they get to Montana, and they have their attack, and he's dying. And so Gus gets called to commit to bury him back in Texas, where they came from. Now they're in Montana. And he says, "I don't want to be buried under the cold tundra of Montana. I want to be buried in Texas." So a good share at the end of the movie of the trials and tribulations of him hauling that body all the way back to Texas. And so he hauls them all the way back to where he was supposed to go in Texas. He's just about had it. It's worn out. It's been a long trip, 3,000 miles. He digs the hole. He buries him. Because when you make a promise, you keep it. When you make a promise, you keep it. But the line that you have to remember is, "This will teach me to be more careful about what I promise." And so if you're going to make a promise, keep it. But remember, you got to be more careful about what you promise. And I'm a recovering politician and admit it. And if we have a weakness, is we probably overpromise. And then we make excuses for why it is that we can't keep a promise. So just be careful what you promise. The next one is talk less and say more. Cowboys, what? What's that, Bill?
I said, wait a minute, we're professors.
Okay. Cowboys are depicted in this book as strong, silent types. They're silent types. And one of the quotes in the book is, "The bigger the mouth, the better it looks shut." So the bigger the mouth, the better it looks shut. They ranked lawyers and windbags right up there with rustlers. They didn't like rustlers at all. They didn't like lawyers, and they didn't like paddle. But Cowboys were, I forgot we have a rustler in our midst. But cowboys were doers and not talkers, and I think that's fairly typical. If you live around our country community in New Mexico, pretty much they don't have a whole lot to say. They're very, very collegial and very easy to get along with, but they don't, as we do, sit around the